Hi, everyone. Today, let's talk about the Fed. Then we'll talk Snap earnings really quick. And then we'll go over AMD results as well. And then we'll hit the charts. And then we'll look at my abysmal trading results. I really underestimated the end of day rally, and that hurt a little bit. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make this video every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So in case you didn't know, the Fed is tomorrow, the FOMC meeting. The plan is they are going to raise 25 basis points, and then we'll have to see their comments and their plans for future guidance. Obviously, will affect the markets a lot. I believe it comes out at 2 p.m. Eastern, so keep an eye on that. And it should be interesting to see what Jay Powell says for the future of interest rates this year. Moving over to Snap, they struggled this year, so digital ad revenue continues to struggle. Again, I expect this to affect Meta and Amazon and Alphabet. All of these companies make a good amount of money from advertising, and if Snap is struggling, we should expect those companies to struggle into their earnings as well. This is really the third straight quarter that this company has struggled. Obviously, it's not as strong as those other companies, but generally, ad spending is fairly well spread across the different platforms. They might not struggle as much as Snap, but if Snap is struggling, you should generally expect that they are going to struggle as well. Moving over to AMD, AMD did well. They plan to continue to steal market share from Intel, and they don't think that the pauses in demands are going to affect them quite as well. They've been doing quite well so far, and they continue to raise their future guidance. They raised their future guidance for revenues from $5 billion to $5.6 billion. Stock is up after hours more than 3%. AMD is really led well, I think. I like their CEO and their leadership team. They continue to do well despite tough conditions, and this really seems to be another successful earnings for them. This is really in stark contrast to Intel, who really struggled, but AMD continues to do well here, and you should expect Nvidia to do quite well also. Moving over to the charts, starting with the S&P 500, on the 15-minute and the daily chart, you can see we gapped down, rallied throughout the session. It was actually quite aggressive here on the SPY. Looking at the daily chart, you can see we bounced off of the 9 EMA. We did talk about that as a potential option. Did actually have a new high of day close. We are selling off a little bit here after hours, but this is interesting. We're at key resistance going into the FOMC meeting. We did expect that. I didn't think we were going to sell off to the bottom from yesterday's sell-off. We talked about a potential up move today as a possibility, and that is what we got here. I did think it would be a little bit weaker than this. We blew through multiple resistances to the upside here, which was definitely quite strong. Like I said, new high close, higher than Friday's close, but not higher than Friday's peak, so that's interesting. And you would certainly expect the peak to be taken out during the FOMC day. I don't think we're going to move higher necessarily, but I do expect at least a wick through that Friday high, just to take out all the stops before we move lower, in my opinion. Moving over to the NASDAQ on the 15-minute chart, you can see similar thesis, gap down, filled the gap, rallied aggressively, cleared the highs from the previous day. But you'll note here that we did not take out the high from Friday like we did on the SPY. So the SPY outperformed the NASDAQ here today. Generally, that shows a little bit of weakness in the market. Tech is not leading to the upside. You can see some fairly significant rollovers here on the RSI, especially after hours here on the 15-minute. Fairly decent steps down throughout the day despite higher price action. Like I said, I thought we would move down more aggressively here towards the end of the day, but really we kept rallying. You can see the 15-minute chart was giving some bearish indicators, continue to trend down throughout the day, but it just didn't do it. It continued to rally despite the weakening momentum. We had weak momentum on the 4-hour chart as well, but it just kept going higher. It's quite strange. It does look like a little bit of manipulation into the FOMC day, just in my opinion. Did get above that previous resistance as well, all the way up to 294.62. Definitely interesting, and we'll have to keep an eye on this. Like I said, I still think we're bearish going into the FOMC and after earnings on Thursday, but another strong day here on the NASDAQ. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, the Russell actually demonstrating a lot of strength, took out all the previous highs here, had a new finish high, much higher than all the rest of the indices, all the way up at 191, cleared the Friday high by quite a bit, and continued to rally pretty aggressively throughout the day. You can see the Dow did not clear that previous high from Friday, did come up to resistance, the major trend line, and then it's starting to reject here a little bit after hours. right at technical resistance as you would expect going into FOMC day. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Apple definitely not rallying nearly as much as the NASDAQ or the SPY. Can see that high of Friday all the way up at 147. Didn't get anywhere near there. Did rally slightly, but looked fairly weak today. Looks like we're creating a lower high and that we should expect this to roll through resistance and start looking to some lower prices, maybe around 137, 138. And there's certainly going to be some buyers here at 139 as well, but that's generally the range that I'm looking for the next move down. Moving over to Tesla, quite a bit stronger. Did not take out Friday highs or the most recent highs, but did rally and stay generally flat throughout the session. Definitely some strength in Tesla after their earnings. And I would expect them to hold up fairly well, even if the rest of the market tends to sell off here in the short term after the FOMC and big earnings. Moving over to consumer staples and consumer discretionary, both rallied really aggressively, both took out their most recent highs. Super interesting. This is probably based on the PCI data that came out this morning. That data came out pretty good. I think it was 1% versus the 1.1% expected for wage growth. Definitely lower wage growth is what you want to see. Overall, interesting here to see both of these growing on the same day. Definitely bodes for a stronger move higher if everything is moving up together and we're not rotating out of either one of these. So definitely keep an eye on that into tomorrow. Could certainly be a fake out into the FOMC meeting just to take out those stops, get a nice wick higher before we move lower, certainly possible. But again, this structure here on consumer discretionary looks intact and moving higher. Moving over to IYT, just briefly, took out the most recent highs, definitely participated in the rally, showing strength, interestingly, into the FOMC. Still in the same range that we've been in, certainly could make another high mark here. So we have 1, 2, we make a third push to the high, and we don't break through. Generally, you would expect it to fail at that point. Certainly possible, but right now, quite a bit of strength here in transports. I didn't really expect that going into the day. Moving over to semis. Did show strength just like everything else today. Looks like we might fill this gap going back to Friday tomorrow. That would be interesting. Get that gap filled before we make a move lower. You can see momentum on the daily chart still stepping down. RSI still just below the EMA on the daily chart. So rallying here today, but still showing weakness on the indicators. Moving over here to stocks above their 20 and 50-day moving averages. This is interesting here. So we had a big move higher despite some lower prices in the NASDAQ. Of course, the SPY did make a new high close. So that does make sense a little bit here, but this is aggressive, a little bit stronger than I thought it would be once again. Could certainly be manipulation into the FOMC. You could definitely discount it as that. And definitely stay nimble going into tomorrow. This is an indicator of some potentially higher prices if we get some decent information from the FOMC. Moving over to government yields, you can see the 2 years sold off throughout the day. Probably should have been paying better attention to the yields here. You can see both of them actually sold off a little bit. The 10-year was a little bit more volatile and didn't sell off as much, but both of them sold off at least a little bit. Again, you can see resistance here. We're looking for a breakout of either of those levels to help confirm whether the market is going to go down or not. Moving over to the dollar, it basically did exactly what we thought it was going to do. So it sold off into the early session, found support just like we thought, rallied all the way up to this previous high going back to Friday the 20th. We talked about that exact level in the last video. Took out that level and then rejected really strongly from there and went much lower. You can see we're sitting right on top of the highs here from Wednesday the 25th. Certainly didn't expect to sell off that aggressively. I did think we would take out that previous high, but you can see that was an area of clear demand and it sold off really aggressively from there. Certainly could be an indicator that we're going to find some support in here and move higher. But at this point, you would be looking for a double top in that area. If you do find rejection in here again, then you would expect the dollar to move significantly lower from this range. That's not to say that it couldn't move lower right now. It certainly could. But if this is going to be a topping process, I would expect it to come up here one more time, touch that again, and then reject if it's going to, and then make new lows from this previous low. Moving over to JNK real quick, you can see gapped up, rallied throughout the session, confirmed the rally here today, showed strength throughout the session. Definitely interesting to see how many factors are confirming the rally to the upside, and you do have to factor that in even if you're bearish like I am. Moving over to TLT, same thing here. You can see we rallied throughout the session. Does look quite strong going into the day. Maybe we rally up to 109. find that rejection could certainly happen. Looking at the 200 SMA on the daily chart for rejection. But if we do break through there, then you have to start looking to some next highs. And we're looking at probably 115 at this next gap fill. Going back to Friday, the 19th of August, that would be the next level if we can take out this previous high of 109.50. Moving over to the VIX, you can see we did get through resistance early in the session, and then we sold off from that level. We did make a higher low here, so that's good. But this rejection is not exactly what you would want to see. It is a good first attempt. Maybe we find that higher low, we rally through, and get back up to that 25, 24 level that we've been talking about, and start to see that real sell-off begin. And if this sell-off does materialize, like I've said before, I think this could put us into a real long-term bottom where we can potentially trade to the long side for the rest of the year from that level. Looking at my results, you can see I did not do well. I definitely took some bad trades. I wasn't watching the markets as well as I should have been. I was trying to take some shorter-term trades, and it didn't quite play out. That volatility right at the end of the session also shook me out quite a bit. Most of those losses were actually right at the end of the session, and I was not fully prepared for that violent of a move to the downside and then a strong swing to the upside on the NASDAQ. But like you can see here, I do have no positions going into tomorrow. I'm going to be playing both sides. Everything is still bullish to the upside in terms of structure, but like I said, it could be a fake out going into the FOMC, take out all the stops, and start selling off into that bigger down move that I've been expecting for quite a while at this point. Sorry for the late video, and sorry it had to be quick. Got a little bit behind on my schedule today, but definitely put anything in the comments that you would like me to cover in my next video. Make sure you like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. I make it every single day the markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.